Hey guys, and welcome back to another video and another Hackintosh guide. And today what we are going to do is to install macOS Mojave on our computer to turn it into a working Hackintosh. And we are back, and don't forget to check out today's video sponsor, which is PureVPN, one of the fastest VPN services that I've used so far, with apps for almost any platform, including Android tvOS, which we love here on the channel at an affordable price. So don't forget to check out the link down below. And guys, welcome back to another Hackintosh guide, as I was saying on the intro, and today macOS Mojave, which is already working, as you probably may have seen by some images, probably on Instagram and YouTube and so on and so forth, Facebook, sorry. And I only want to mention a few notes here before we begin, as usual. Now, the first one is credits. There will be a section down below, and guys, have in mind once again that this video would not be possible without the great and huge community around the Hackintosh topic. So don't forget to check the links down below, give them some love, because this community is just awesome. Also, let's not forget that this guide is optimized for my own system. So if you guys have a different system, you will be able to follow up this guide, but most probably you will need to tweak one part or the other after you have your USB drive and so on and so forth. So probably you will need to check out if you have a different motherboard or a different CPU, which are the two components that will change most of the things. Nonetheless, I will leave links down below for all the components that I'm using on my computer, so that you guys can have an idea. I will also leave some links for videos that I've done about those same components. Also, I would like to mention that we will need a working Hackintosh or a MacBook Pro, Mac Mini, whatever. We will need a macOS system so that we can download the macOS Mojave, and also to configure everything so that we can install later. And finally, one thing that I do believe that it's important to mention right over here, this guide is composed of two main parts, one of which is to create our USB bootable drive so that we will be able to install the system, and of course the second part will be installing the system itself. But one thing that I would like to take your attention is that the most important part is actually to create the USB drive, because if we miss something, the installation will not work as we want. So just have this in mind, two steps: creating the USB drive and then installing. But if we do everything correctly on the USB bootable drive, then the installation will be very easy, as you guys will have the chance to see. Now that I've mentioned all the notes that I had for you guys, let's start with this guide. First of all, we will need to download some software, and we will need, in this particular case, to download the Mojave MBR firmware check patch, so we can create the USB drive. And guys, one note is that I have tried other methods. Without this tool right over here, they didn't work. So in this particular case for Mojave, we will need this one. We will also need Clover EFI Bootloader and Clover Configurator. So all we need to do is to download them and leave them on the desktop so that it's easier for us to work. Now we will need also, of course, to download macOS Mojave from the App Store, and finally we will need a USB thumb drive of 8 gigabytes or bigger. This one in particular is 16 gigabytes. And in terms of prerequisites, this is what we need. And now that we have everything downloaded and we have our USB drive on our computer, let's start to create our USB bootable drive. Now, first of all, just open up the MBR manual method. Just open it up from the desktop and execute the MBR Easy Installer Maker, and hopefully you will see on the screen so that it's easier. Now it will request for our password. We will set the password, and it will ask to drag the macOS Mojave installation file that we already downloaded. So we will drag to the script, press enter once, then it will ask to grab the USB drive that we want to use. We will do the same, grab it to the script, press enter once and then press enter once again to confirm the installation. After that, it will start to copy the files and build the USB thumb drive, and we will need to wait about 10 minutes or so, and that is it. Now at this moment what we have is a bootable USB drive with macOS Mojave, which will work for any Mac, but it's not quite ready for a Hackintosh. Now you also noticed that our USB drive has a weird name. Well, not name, just numbers. So at this moment I would suggest you guys to change the name. In my particular case I did call it Mojave Installer. We will also close the MBR installer maker window and eject the MBR manual method image, just so that we have a clean desktop and we can move on without any confusions. Now the next step is to extract an Open Clover Configurator. Open it up and let's go to Mount EFI. Just search for our USB drive, which in this particular case I did rename it, so it's Mojave Installer, and then select Mount Partition and open it up. And what we will see right over here is the EFI partition is empty. Now the EFI partition is the most important part on this guide, which will be the files that will make our Hackintosh work or not. And for those of you guys that have the same system as mine, I will leave my EFI folder down below, so you don't need to follow up the rest of the video. Just grab that EFI folder, place in your EFI partition, and you are good to go. You can start installing macOS Mojave. For those of you that have a different system, or if you want to follow up the old tutorial, then we will move on so that we can create everything from scratch. And for those that are still here, now let's move on and open up or extract the Clover EFI bootloader and run it, and just follow up the steps that you guys see on screen. There are a few configurations here and there, but I will give you guys a few seconds so that you can check it out and then do the same on your computer. And at the same time, if we take a look at our USB drive EFI partition, it is empty, but once we press the install button, it will create the EFI folder right over there. And that is it. Once the installation is finished, we will have a working USB bootable drive, and this is a basic EFI folder, so we will need a few kexts and configuration depending on our system, of course. And as I said, I will leave my own EFI folder down below so that any of you guys may download and use it, and I will also leave some links to the kexts that you guys will require, just in case that you have a different system than mine. Now, one of the things that I would like to mention right over here is that I was running a High Sierra system already, so what I'm going to do is to copy my config plist file to this EFI folder, and I will also copy the kexts that I was already using on High Sierra, which will work on Mojave as well. And you guys, if you are on the same position of mine, if you were using High Sierra, then probably your configuration files and your kext will work as well on macOS Mojave. If not, once again, links will be down below so that you can download everything and just paste them on the same folder that you guys have seen on screen, that I was pasting the config plist file and also the kexts. And at this moment we have a bootable macOS Mojave USB thumb drive ready to install macOS on our computer, which is just great. Now what we'll need to do next is to install the system, but I will leave a note right over here, which is we will need a few settings for our BIOS. I will leave on the description down below all the settings that I've used on mine. So if you are using a ASUS motherboard, you can just copy and do the same that I did. If you are using other system, then just search on the web and you will find a lot of tips that you can do to change your BIOS settings. Now after that we will reboot our computer and get in the BIOS settings so that we can choose the USB drive as the boot drive. In my particular case, as you guys can see on screen, it's the UEFI general USB flash disk, and then I will select the boot macOS install from Mojave installer. Then I will wait for a couple of minutes until reach the installation screen. Then we will need to select a few options, basically agree to the license and continue. Of course, anyone that already installed macOS, this will be very easy. Then we will need to select disk utility and format the SSD that we want to use to install macOS. Once it's formatted, we can go back on the menu and press continue, and now we can select the drive, and we will need to wait for a few more minutes. Then once this process finishes, it will reboot by itself, and when it reboots, we will need to select the USB drive once again to boot. And once we get to the Clover screen, instead of selecting once again the USB, we will need to select the SSD. As you guys can see on the installation, it's called macOS Mojave install, so we just press it to continue the installation. Then we will need to wait a couple more minutes and we will be on the welcome screen. Now just select our country, keyboard and so on and so forth, very basic right over here. And after those small configurations, we should have a working Hackintosh. Now at this moment we will check if we have sound, Ethernet and so on and so forth, if everything is working fine. Don't forget to check once again the hardware that I'm using. At this moment, for example, I'm using an AMD GPU, so I didn't require any more drivers and so on and so forth. But before we finish, we need one more step, because at this moment I will need to use my USB thumb drive to boot up the system, and I don't want that. I want to boot the system from the SSD and not from the boot drive. So what we will need to do once again is to open Clover Configurator, and let's do the same process as we did before. We will go to Mount EFI partition and mount the EFI partition of our USB drive, open it up, also mount the EFI partition of our SSD, open it up, and as we can see, the SSD has a empty EFI partition, so we will need to copy the EFI from the USB drive and put it to the SSD. Now finally guys, all we need to do is to restart our computer. Once again, go to our BIOS, and there what I'm going to do is to select my boot drive as the SSD that I just installed macOS. So every time that I restart my computer, it will go directly to that SSD, and that SSD has the EFI partition with Clover, which will give me at this moment the option to boot to Mojave, iSierra or Windows. And of course, if you have more operating systems, they will appear on the system, and then you can select the one that you want to boot. In my particular case, I've got configured that if I don't touch the screen for 3 seconds, it will boot to macOS Mojave, and if I touch my keyboard, then I can select Windows or iSierra, or if we have Linux and so on and so forth. And that is it guys. Hopefully this video was helpful to get your macOS Mojave Hackintosh working. On the next video I will explain, for those of you guys that have still any questions, one thing that it's really useful, which is to get all our apps configuration and so on and so forth from iSierra to macOS Mojave without any issues at all, because the worst part on installing a new system is to get all the configurations that we had on a previous computer or system, to be more precise. And that is it. Hope that you guys enjoyed the video. And if you did, so don't forget that usual thumbs up. My name is Roberto, and as always, I'll see you guys on the next one.